Good morning, or depending when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so I've made a podcast all about the Pokémon trading card game, and you're listening to PTCG Radio. Now, this week we're going to be talking about, there's not much news, but there's a little bit of a news article which I found a little while ago, and I found interesting. We've had quite a lot of news coming up, quite packed shows, a little bit lighter this week, a little bit less kind of pressing news to talk about, so I thought I would bring that in today. We're going to look at the final states results, and although I said last week we weren't expecting anything major, we have had a development, shall we say, in the states results, something which I think is worth bringing up. And then we're going to compare a couple of similar decks in Seismitoad and Exeggutor to finish off the podcast this week. So in terms of news, it is a slightly lighter news week. We have the Flygon box, which was spoiled a little while ago, which we knew was coming, but we've seen product images of it. Get yourself over to pokebeach.com if you do want to have a look at that. It's nothing particularly amazing, and as we've seen, Flygon EX is... Let's just say that Flygon EX is not 100% terribly exciting. It's another one of those Pokemon that falls into the category of interesting. It's got a nice little ability, which can make you force your opponent to switch their active Pokemon, although it reads you may have your opponent switch his or her active Pokemon, so it's their choice, not yours. It's got an interesting attack for a grass, 2 fighting, and a colourless. Remember, with double dragon energy, if you put 2 of them on there, then you would have just 2 energy attachments, of course both being special and defeated by enhanced time, which is a problem. It does 80 damage, and you flip a coin until you get tails. It does 30 more damage for each heads. Not terribly exciting, I'm afraid. I do like Flygon EX, however, for the ability. The only problem is, I should have mentioned, this is very important, Flygon has got to be active in order for you to use the ability. Now, by all means, you can have him... I suppose think of this like Slurpuff. Slurpuff at the moment, it's got the ability to draw a card if it's on your bench, or to draw 2 cards if it's in the active position. So what you can do with Flygon, what a lot of people do with Slurpuff is they stick a floatstone on it, and then, you know, they just sit it on the bench, but when they've got an opportunity to put it into the active, when they hit a super scoop up for a Seismitoad EX, or when something gets KO'd and they've got to put something else into the active, they then put Slurpuff active in order to, you know, draw an extra card. You could use Flygon like that. Now, it's got a retreat cost of 2, which can be a bit of a problem if you don't have a floatstone on, or if your opponent plays a startling megaphone, especially if you're not playing a Seismitoad deck. So, I think this falls into the... I suppose maybe I dismissed it just a little bit quickly a second ago. I like Flygon EX's ability. I think the attack is overpriced, and honestly, if the ability used worked from the bench, I could see Flygon being a fun little tech. But being something that has to be in the active to use, I don't see Flygon as particularly useful, which upsets me a little bit. I would like it to be better, but the fact of the matter is, it's just not as good as it could be. And another little piece of news, it's not terribly exciting, but the colourless Rayquaza EX from Roaring Skies has been revealed. We've seen the English version of this card. And just to confirm that the one coming in the and I did say this on a previous podcast, but just to make sure, the Rayquaza EX that's coming in the box, I think it's got an attack for 1 colourless energy that allows you to search for the Mega EX, but you want the colourless EX, and we've already got that supporter that allows you to search for 3 colourless Pokemon. And bearing in mind that Rayquaza EX and Shaman and Altaria are all colourless Pokemon that you're going to want to be getting. So you'll be playing a lot of that. You'll be playing 4 of that supporter anyway, and quite possibly just 4 of that supporter for random receiver. Although that would, Lysandre's going to be a pain, so I'll let you work that one out yourself. But Rayquaza EX, the one from the set, has an attack for a colourless energy, which does 10 damage, but it does 60 damage to an EX. Now, don't get me wrong, that's far from ideal, but if you're having a bad first turn, if you can't get the, if you can't get the, Mega EX out in the first turn, it's better than the other one, shall we say. Like I say, it's not perfect, but it's better than the other one. So, that's about it for the news, but there was a little story that caught my eye, like I say, a couple of weeks ago. It was right around the time that Primal Clash was coming out. And there's a UK website which posted this up, and it was a public post, so I don't mind sharing it with you. And it reads, I'm going to read you a little bit of the blurb they put out there. As you eagerly await the next chapter in the Pokémon saga, I thought you would appreciate an update on the latest release, Primal Clash. Pokémon releases are becoming more and more complex as a vastly greater number of products are added to the schedule. As a quick side note from me here, you know from this podcast there's all kinds of boxes and all sorts coming out. I update you on all the products coming out, and it really is, as you know, there's a real minefield of them lately. This does unfortunately mean that there is more scope for something to go wrong. Some of the products have been sent to us and will arrive today for dispatch today. Some products are still outstanding, with some en route and some not even at the distributors yet. Part of the problem is that Pokémon are growing greatly concerned about the number of retailers breaking the street release dates on their products, and so they are putting pressure on the distributors to ship later and later. For this reason, we will only get most of the stock sometime today when it needs to be shipped today. And as an example, and I'm not going to read you all of these, but the booster boxes and packs arrive Tuesday at 11 a.m. and they have to be sent out to consumers Tuesday at 4:15. Theme decks arrive Tuesday at 11 p.m. and go out to consumers at 4:15, same with the Elite Trainer box. But things like the free pack blisters and the blister boosters, etc., are going to be arriving sometime on the Tuesday and not going out to customers until the Wednesday. And I suppose the kind of the root of this story, the nugget of it which was interesting for me, is that we all get excited about the fact that some retailers are breaking release dates, and we're seeing this more and more. The cards are being spoiled online, and by spoiled I mean they're being kind of, put up online so we can see what they say, because people are releasing, and nowadays it tends to be things like the booster packs aren't out, but one retailer's gone and put the single pack blisters out, or they've put the Elite Trainer boxes out, or this happens more and more. People are rarely selling the booster packs themselves early, but what tends to happen is there's a retailer here or there that decides to put some of the products out. Like, I think it was one of the sets recently. It was the one where you get the little single card collector albums where each page only fits one card, and a booster pack for a few quid, and they were being released, so you could get the set early if you're willing to spend over the odds with that. And I must confess, I have sympathy for the retailers in this situation. I know it's not the kind of thing we talk about on the podcast, but, we talk about all the new cards, we talk about tournament results, and I suppose other than that, it's kind of dealer's choice. I have the microphone, so to speak, literally and metaphorically. And this was something that kind of interested me, and I suppose it's kind of, we don't even need these cards to be leaked early. We always know what's in the set. We've seen the Japanese cards. We don't really get many surprises along those lines. Every so often there'll be like a new Deerling, which we haven't seen before, which is UK exclusive and comes out in Japan a little bit later, but that's about it. And by these retailers leaking early, it's actually screwing over the consumers. Because what it means is a few people get some product a little bit early. English cards that we know exactly what they are because we've seen the Japanese cards and we've seen both the artwork and we've seen the effects of all the attacks. They end up going online and confirming what we already knew anyway. And then the flip side of that is that, people who have actually paid the money and waiting patiently don't get the stuff when they need it because the distributors are sending it out so gosh darn late. So I thought that was just a little bit interesting. And, I doubt anyone from the retailers is listening to this, but I would quite like to see the retailers stopping leaking it early so that the distributors are a little bit less skittish and the individual consumers don't get screwed over. That would be nice to me. Now, a couple other little bits of news which are potentially slightly less directly relevant. First of all, I have finally completed my project to get Nottingham Regionals online. The final was uploaded to my YouTube channel today. Just go to YouTube and search PTCG Radio or Google PTCG Radio YouTube. You'll find it very easily. By the way, I'm up to 841 subscribers on YouTube at the last count, so try and get your friends to subscribe to YouTube. Go and get them. I'm looking for 1,000 subscribers. Never thought I'd actually get that high. Strangely, when I realized a little while ago I'd stopped uploading I'd stopped putting the podcasts on YouTube, so I had about 2 months worth and I started uploading them, and I actually went and lost about 20 subscribers on YouTube. Got down to about 740, and since I started putting the Nottingham Regionals videos online, I've gained 100 subscribers in a couple of weeks. This makes me happy, but I'd love to get to 1,000 subscribers. If you know anyone that's interested, and I'd rather it was Pokemon people rather than just randomers, although I'll take randomers just so we're clear. But if you've got any friends that are into Pokemon and haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, I would very much appreciate it if you, if you gave them got them to subscribe to the podcast. That would make me happy. But Nottingham Regionals is now entirely online. I've got a video from rounds 4, 5, 6, 7, top 8, top 4, and the final, including one hell of a misplay unless I've missed something. So do go and have a look at them, check them out, comment on my YouTube channel, subscribe, like them, all of that good stuff. I've been getting some positive feedback. About these. People are seeming very positive about these videos, and not a lot of people are uploading these kind of videos regularly, so it's something I'm looking to expand and do more of. As always, let me know what you think. If you don't want to get in touch on YouTube, as always, you can tweet me at the Wassy, or you can email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk. Now, there are going to be more videos going up. I've been in touch with the lovely Terry Goodacre and Matt Blower, the lovely chaps who gave me the footage from Nottingham Regionals. They took some footage at Yeovil Regionals, hopefully including my top 8 game. So they're going to try and get that to me. We had a chat about that tonight, and hopefully there'll be more videos going up from Yeovil Regionals starting quite soon. So we should have another kind of couple of weeks with, up to 9 games going up. If we've got one from each round, there'll be 9 games going up. So hopefully there'll be a bunch more videos going up over the next couple of weeks. And then I'll be looking at other streams I can maybe use. As always, if you've got any streams that you can send me or link me to, and I'd need permission from the people who recorded the stream, but if you've got any streams you can link me to, do let me know. And a final little piece of Pokemon-y news. In the UK, at least, the newest Pokemon Amiibos went to pre-order today. You could pre-order the Greninja and Jigglypuff Amiibos. Huge kudos to Nintendo for emailing out yesterday saying that they would go for pre-order at 3 p.m. today to warn all of us. Not so impressed that they actually went up at 2:44. But I did actually manage to pre-order Amiibos for the first time in months. I looked an hour later and they were no longer for pre-order. They're, all pre-ordered out. But hey-ho, there are other Amiibos going up for pre-sale in the UK at 3 p.m. tomorrow. So if you're listening to this quite early, there's Ganondorf and Dark Pit and a couple of others. Zero Suit Samus, I think, is going up there. So if you're interested in Amiibos in the UK, they're very hard to pre-order at the moment because you've got to know when they go up on the website, or else you're going to miss the pre-orders and they're going to be sold out. And the newest wave of Amiibos with the Fire Emblem ones, I've never seen them available to pre-order. So 3 p.m. tomorrow if you're interested in that. And if you're listening to this early and you're in the UK, nice little heads up, I think. So states results then. There were 15 state championships in week 4. And they follow the kind of pattern we've seen. Now, a reminder about states. State championships, there are a lot of them. There's 15 in one weekend, which means that we do see individual metagames that change from state to state. Some states will see, more Virgin or more Seismitoad or whatever. When you get to a regional championship, what you tend to find is the metagame, you will see a US metagame. You will see a mixture of metagames from around the country, because you'll have maybe on a heavy weekend 3 regional championships. Often there'll only be 1. So you see a higher attendance and a greater mixture of decks. You will see really a cross-section of the metagame around the country as a whole. But for state championships, as there's 15, you're talking on average, 3 states worth of people going to each state championship. So you really are seeing more local metagames, and it might be that decks that are big in one part of the country see almost no play in the other part. So that does need to be borne in mind. The other thing we need to remember when looking at the week 4 results is that we've seen 3 weeks worth of results. They've been published. We all know about them, and heck, if you've been listening to this podcast, you most certainly know about them. We looked at them in great detail last week, so you knew what to be prepared for. So going into last week, we saw that Seismitoad EX was the clear number 1, Yveltal and Virgin were the kind of second-tier decks, and then there was a bunch of stuff which was vaguely playable after that. But we really did see a huge drop-off between those top 3 decks. So in week 4, we saw Seismitoad once again being the top deck. It had the most top cuts with 17, and it had the second most wins with 3 wins. But the thing to remember about Seismitoad is it is being gunned for. Now, there's a weird kind of thing. Oh, I should say thank you to the CharizardLounge.com. This is where I'm once again getting my information from. They seem very reliable. And essentially, they are collecting the results together, so I don't have to bother doing so. I still disagree with how many different Manectric they break up Manectric a bit too much, but other than that, I really like their list. And if we include Seismitoad Manectric, then they've actually got 23 top cuts, and the next biggest was Exeggutor with 13. So, in terms of top cuts, hugely in favour of Seismitoad EX. So, one of the things you need to remember is that after 3 weeks, everyone knows Seismitoad EX is the best deck. So it's got to be borne in mind that people are gunning for it, and if it's still doing well, and we do see this in state championships and regionals when they go from week to week, even cities, sometimes a deck does really well at the beginning of a series of tournaments, only to drop off kind of halfway through as people are gunning for it. The fact that that's not happening with Seismitoad EX, even though people clearly are gunning for it, is absolutely huge. And there were only really 2 other relevant decks this weekend. Now, in terms of Yveltal, there were 9 top cuts and nothing beyond top 4. Yveltal took a huge drop off this past weekend. And I don't think that's terribly surprising, because Virizion Genesect has a decent matchup against Yveltal and a good matchup against Seismitoad. Seismitoad EX has a decent matchup against Yveltal. Both of those are far from auto wins. Yveltal can take down both of those decks, but they're decent matchups. So what you'll be seeing is a lot of good players are basically going to look and say, well, hang on a second. If I play Virizion Genesect, I've got a decent matchup against Yveltal and a good matchup against Seismitoad. If I play Seismitoad, I've got a decent matchup against Yveltal, but I've got a good matchup against the rest of the field. So it might just be that Yveltal saw a bit of a drop-off in terms of play, but also it doesn't stack up. It stacks up fine against the other top decks, but Yveltal doesn't stock up well. Yveltal EX, we've talked about this on the podcast before, it's a kind of deck where you can make a versatile list and it can do a bunch of stuff, and it can stand up nicely to the other decks, but it's not really the kind of deck which is going to go and crush everything, at least not unless it's in the hand of a really, really good player. So, I don't know exactly why Yveltal EX took a drop-off. I would imagine that some of the top players who could have won with it have jumped to other decks that they thought had better matchups overall. And it's not in a position where it's the clear best deck in the format, or whether it's really kind of taking down the best deck in the format. It's there with Virizion and Seismitoad, but it doesn't have a particularly good matchup against either. And honestly, you could make a strong argument that it has a slightly less than favourable matchup. I would put it slightly unfavourable against both. In fact, if you want to see a Seismitoad deck taking on an Yveltal deck, go and have a look at the final from Nottingham Regionals, and you can decide for yourself. Obviously, that's on my YouTube channel. Shameless plug, but hey-ho. Now, the second deck is very, very close between Virizion and Exeggutor. But let's have a quick chat about Virizion. It had 12 top cuts and 4 wins. Exeggutor had 13 top cuts and 3 wins. So you can make an argument for either. But I would say the fact that it's got 1 less top cut but 1 more win. And, we only saw 3 out of 12 Virizion Genesects lose in top 8. That's 25%. Whereas we saw 7 Exeggutors lose in top 8. That's just over 50%. So, Virizion Genesect, clearly the better choice when you make it into Top Cut. So, bearing all that in mind, let's call Virizion Genesect the second best deck of the weekend. 4 wins, 3 seconds, 2 top 4s, and 3 top 8s. And, like I said previously, Virizion Genesect is very good against Seismitoad. Now, don't get me wrong, Seismitoad can win. With Crushing Hammers and Headringers, they can slow Virizion Genesect down and win, absolutely. But at the end of the day, we know that it's not a good matchup for Seismitoad. Seismitoad can beat Virizion Genesect, but it has to have a good start. Virizion Genesect remains one of the most crazy consistent decks we've seen since I started playing, 4 years ago. And to be perfectly honest with you, it's going to run through Seismitoad like 80-90% of the time. It really is. Now you can put a Charizard in your deck, but even then, you're essentially hurting your consistency so that you can pile free energy onto a Charizard, bearing in mind a lot of the best and most consistent Seismitoad decks only play 4 double colourless energy anyway, and unless you get it set up really, really quickly, and that's assuming your opponent doesn't play Enhanced Stamina to get rid of a DCE, unless you get set up really, really quickly, your opponent's just going to end up red signalling and G-boostering your Charizard anyway. I'm not saying Charizard is a bad tech in Seismitoad against Virizion Genesect, What I am saying is you can't use laser, so it doesn't get a one-hit KO anyway. It does 60 damage with a muscle band. That adds up to, and weakness, you get 160. And yeah, I know you can then follow up with a Quaking Punch KO, which without a muscle band against a Virizion would only do 10 damage. It would still be enough to get the KO, but then you got a Virizion, Seismitoad active against a grass deck. Charizard helps, but I don't know if the fall in consistency is going to really help. From my experience, I found the best Seismitoad decks at the moment to be the consistent ones. Either Seismitoad, Garbodor, maybe with Manectric, but even then you're just putting in a couple of electric energy, and you've got a one energy attacker against Yveltal, or with Slurpuff, the hyper consistent list. I don't think Charizard is worth it personally, but then again, a very, very good player I saw post on the internet just before this weekend of States said that if you don't play Charizard in Seismitoad Garbodor, that would be a misplay. We clearly disagree on that. Other opinions are available. And wrong. Moving into Exeggutor, this was the big surprise of the weekend. Exeggutor saw 3 wins, 3 second places, and then 7 top 8s. Now, Exeggutor is a very, very strong deck. What I love about Exeggutor is, it was about a month ago, just before States, or maybe after the first week, but I think it was just before States. There was a post on Burbank City Gym, the popular Facebook Pokemon group, where a guy basically said, can we all just agree that Exeggutor's not a real deck and move on? He said he was bored of playing against it online because there were just too many people playing it. It wasn't a real deck. It wasn't a valid deck. And my friend Tamao, who was playing Exeggutor at the time and doing very well, top-cutting cities after cities and then regionals after regionals, making a top 22 run for a paid invite with Exeggutor. And the reason this thread came to my attention was Tamao was commenting on it. And that's how it came to my attention. And I had a chat with Tamao about this. It turns out this was like the 4th one he'd seen, and he'd finally got an inclination to actually reply to it, essentially saying, I've been playing this with a lot of success in the UK. And then I saw a post just this past week where somebody said, well, Seismitoad and Exeggutor are clearly, kings of the metagame at the moment. I was like, hang on a second. Either it's a joke deck that isn't valid, or it's a king of the metagame. It can't be both. Now, I would like to put on record, I might boast occasionally on the podcast, I'll be honest about that, but I've been saying on this podcast for a few weeks, and go back and listen, Exeggutor is an utterly valid deck. It is a good deck. You can see Tamao playing it for a couple of games on the Nottingham Regionals videos that I've uploaded to my YouTube channel. Another shameless plug there. And essentially, it's very, very similar to Seismitoad. Now, if you're not aware what it does, Exeggutor has an attack for 1 energy called Blockade. And it does 10 damage and stops your opponent playing supporters. Other than this, it plays very, very similar to Seismitoad. You supporter lock them, you use Muscle Band to up it to 30 damage, you use Laser and Verbank to increase your damage output, you use Crushing Hammer and Enhanced Hammer to get rid of their energy, you use Head Ringer to also help with the energy denial because they're going to need to use more to get it going. And that's about it. You can use Virizion to make yourself immune to special conditions. You can use Genesect for red signal, and you can play it as a speed deck, like I've talked about on the podcast recently. With you play it with just 4 Juniper, 4 Random Receiver, 4 VS Seeker, and you go. And it's a lock deck. The general theory of the deck is, okay, you're only doing 30 damage per turn, but your opponent can't play supporters. You get rid of energy they do play. They don't draw into more energy because they're running out because they haven't got supporters to play. And, you poison them and hammer off their energy, and you win slow, frustrating games. And we'll talk about how this stacks up to Seismitoad in a minute. But it's got a decent matchup against Seismitoad. It's got a pretty nice matchup against Virizion and Genesect. In fact, it beats anything if you get set up. Virizion and Genesect, if you can get, and again, it's down to the whole Seismitoad argument, if you can get Head Ringers down, and if you can get Crushing Hammers, and if you can get Head Ringers, and they're still one-hitting you as they would a Seismitoad deck, but they've got to do it 6 times to get the win. And this is why it has a much better Virizion and Genesect matchup than Seismitoad EX does. Because you essentially get time to help, and you can even play Silent Lab to you wouldn't play Silent Lab because of Execute, but I suppose you could. You could play Silent Lab so you could hit them with lasers, although you'd have to be very careful because Execute's propagate ability is key to the deck, so you'd essentially have to play Silent Lab down when you didn't need to use Execute, and you'd have to have a Verbank City Gym ready to counter it when you needed it. But it's a tech which I could imagine people playing. You just have to play it very carefully. And you sit there with your Crushing Hammers and your Enhanced Hammer for their Plasma Energy and their Head Ringers and, bringing up their bench Pokemon to, screw them over and essentially running them out of energy and winning. And if you can run them out of energy, you're going to end up winning the game. They have got to end up, they're only 2-hit KOing you with Emerald Slash. They've got to start Megalo Cannoning eventually. So, Exeggutor, good, but you see it losing top cut a lot. It's a fragile deck. We'll talk about that in a minute. So Seismitoad EX, still king of the metagame. Virizion, Genesect and Exeggutor coming up behind. We also saw one win for Flareon off of 8 top cuts. Good against Virizion, Genesect. Can be quite good against Exeggutor if you get an attacker set up, etc. We see a win for Night March again. Crazy good Virizion, Genesect matchup. Can be quite good against Exeggutor if you get attackers going and they don't play trump card. Again, there's a lot of ifs here, let's be honest. And it's pretty good against EX heavy decks. Only one win, which makes me think that the metagame hasn't been kind to it generally, but there was one person at one regional that played a bunch of Virizion, Genesect, Eviltal, etc., and didn't play quite so many Seismitoads. It does not have a good Seismitoad matchup. We also saw a win for Aromatisse, 5 top cuts for Night March. We saw one win for Aromatisse off of 4 top cuts. Like I said last week, it's there and it can take advantage of the meta game, but it's fragile and it's not great. We saw a win for Mega Manectric Water. This is like the one where you would play with Kyurem and Rough Seas, etc. Might do a bit of an expose on this and other speed decks next week if we've got nothing else to have a chat about. And I know I've talked about speed decks before, but maybe next week, if we got nothing else on, I will collate my thoughts on speed decks and talk about how this is going to be affected by Shaman. Really kind of spend next week talking about the speed of the format. That's what I'm planning to do if nothing comes up. But it's Mega Manectric Water, but there were only 3 top cuts in total, and the other 2 went out in top 8. So again, we've got to take this as, we've got to take this as the kind of states thing of, yeah, it had a win, but we're talking favourable metagame, nice matchups on the day, particularly good player, exceptionally good list. Something exceptional happened in order for that person to win, rather than this is the best deck for anyone to pick up. I'm not disparaging or pouring shame on the achievement of the person who won. They clearly did very, very well. But when something does well just at one tournament, there's something at play. Now, sometimes it's they got lucky. I mean, one of my favourite tournaments I ever played, I was playing Quad Kyurem. This was ages ago now, shortly after the release of Next Destinies. And it played Kyurem EX, the one that did 60 damage and got rid of a special energy for free energy. And it played the Outrage Kyurem. And I think my first 4 matchups, I played against a new player who had never played before. I then played against a Fire deck. I then played against a Mew box deck. For those that don't remember, it revolved around Mew Prime, which had 60 HP, and Glaciate did 30 damage to everything on the field. So if I glaciated twice, I won the game. I glaciated twice. And then I played against my good friend Tommy Roberts' Terrakion Miss Magius deck, which again was an absolutely horrible matchup for him, and a really, really good matchup for me. So I ended up 4-0 in a 5-round tournament because I had played, one player at their first ever tournament and 4, 70-30 matchups or better. And that kind of thing can happen at states where you play a deck which maybe isn't the best choice for the tournament or wouldn't be the best choice at a different state championship, but you've got lucky, or for some players, you've read the metagame correctly. When I played Donphan at Yeovil Regionals, it was a horrible metagame call. There was several Kyurem, there were loads of Seismitoad, but on the day, I ended up facing a bunch of Donphan. I faced a Night March, and I faced an Exeggutor, and I ended up getting myself into top 8 without seeing a single Seismitoad. I mean, I hit terrible luck on flips, but I hit good luck with matchups, so let's call it even. And they were the winners of the tournament. We had 10 wins between the big deck Seismitoad, Virizion, and Exeggutor, and then 1 win each for Flareon, Nightmarch, Aromatisse, Mega Manectric Water, and 1 win for Tool Drop. But it was the only Tool Drop that top cut around all the tournaments, so I refer you to my previous little comment. Now, in terms of Groudon versus Kyogre, Kyogre had 5 top cuts, but the best it managed was 1 top 4. And Groudon had 3 top cuts, but it managed to second place. Both those decks are underwhelming at the moment. Donphan dropped to 7 top cuts in 15 tournaments, nothing past the top 4. The thing with Donphan is, I like the matchup against Virizion and Genesect, I really do. And I like the matchup against Exeggutor, although it's, 55-45 at best. We'll talk about it more in a minute. But it's got a horrible Seismitoad matchup. An almost unwinnable Seismitoad matchup. And I know we talked about it before, and if you add in a 1-1 Primal Groudon line, it gets better. But then if you add in a 1-1 Primal Groudon line, then you're making a slower deck, and you're hurting your Virizion Genesect matchup. The crazy speed deck Donphans I've been telling you about and intend to go more into next week. These decks have a crazy good Virizion Genesect matchup, because unless they can keep hitting red signal over and over again after they've got their Genesect out, and you can't keep setting up Donphan, then you're going to win very, very easily there. You're going to be 2-hit KOing their EXs while they, if they're lucky, if they've got a Muscle Band on a Genesect with the free energy and a Deoxys on the bench, they're going to be 1-hit KOing you for 1 prize. So Donphan, I don't know what kind of list that they were playing, but, speed deck struggle against Seismitoad and the other one slow down so you hurt yourself against things like Virizion, Genesect, and especially Exeggutor. The speed Donphan decks have a decent Exeggutor matchup, because if you can set up a couple of Donphans, you've got a good shout in that matchup. Whereas the slower Donphan decks don't have such a good matchup at all. Also worth note, Fighting Crobat didn't see any wins, but it saw 3 second places, 3 top 4s, and 3 top 8s, so it maintains a semblance of relevance. And Eviltal EX, like I say, it had 9 top cuts, but nothing beyond the top 4. Everything else is just fits and starts, the odd deck kind of here or there. So, they're the states results. We've had all 4 weeks of states, and when we add it all up at the end, it's very, very clear. Seismitoad EX is by far and away the best deck in the format, and I really don't think you can argue here. 14 wins and 78 top cuts. Eviltal saw 5 wins and 59 top cuts. Virizion Genesect saw 7 wins and 32 top cuts. Exeggutor saw 5 wins and 20 top cuts. Exeggutor, I want to put it as the 4th best deck behind Eviltal and Virizion, but the thing is, that doesn't actually take account of the fact that Exeggutor really came alive towards the end of states. If we take states as a whole, then Exeggutor is the 4th best deck. You go Seismitoad, Eviltal or Virizion, pick your poison. Eviltal had more top cuts, but Virizion Genesect had 2 more wins, 7 of 5. And then Exeggutor coming in 5th. In 4th. But if you look at it kind of as states go on a little bit, Exeggutor clearly got better as it went on. And, maybe if there were 3 or 4 more weeks of states, Exeggutor would leapfrog Virizion, Genesect, and Eviltal to be clearly the 2nd best deck in the format. Proving right that person on Facebook who said that Seismitoad and Exeggutor rule the format. Or maybe if we had a few more weeks of states, we'd find some other crazy equilibrium and another deck would end up becoming really good. We just don't know. So we're going to finish off today talking about Seismitoad versus Exeggutor. They're both very good decks. They're both worth playing. Which one is better? That's a question we're going to finish off with today. Now, they're both very, very similar decks. Now, when I'm discussing these, I'm going to assume that your Seismitoad deck is going for consistency and it's going for hammers and head ringers and lasers. I know there's many different ways to play it, but I'm going for what I see at the moment as the optimal Seismitoad list. So Seismitoad versus Exeggutor. Seismitoad has Trainer Lock, Exeggutor has Supporter Lock, and I teach a lot about business, and in business we like looking at the short-term, long-term situation. Short-term, trainer lock is better, long-term supporter lock is better. If you can get kind of trainer lock first turn or two of the game and stop your opponent ever playing lasers and tools, etc., that's going to be really good. But over the course of a long game, if your opponent can keep pulling out supporters, they can draw enough energy to maybe get set up and do something against you. Whereas supporter lock, we've all had games where we can't draw a supporter and we lose. Now imagine that's every game and there is no chance you're going to draw into a supporter. That's what it's like playing against Exeggutor. So at the beginning of the game, Seismitoad's trainer lock is worse, plus you can do it on your first turn of the game. Whereas Exeggutor, even if you go second, you're not getting a blockade until at least turn 2, if you go well. Seismitoad EX has a bad weakness and is an EX, and this is why it gives you such a terrible matchup against Virizion and Genesect. They can one-hit KO you so easily and you're giving up 2 prizes. Now you can just as easily argue that Exeggutor has a bad Virizion and Genesect matchup because they're again one-hit KOing you. But they're one-hit KOing you for a single energy. Not to mention, of course, that when you look at recovery, Execute has the Propagate ability, which allows you to take Execute from the discard pile and put it into your hand, which means all you need to do is draw into an Exeggutor every time one gets KO'd, and you're going to be able to be streaming Exeggutors, and you've got trump card to put them back in as and when they get KO'd. Now, Seismitoad is more durable, there's no doubt about that. Seismitoad has 180 HP, whereas Exeggutor has 100 HP. So Seismitoad has the option of sitting up there taking a beating and using Super Scoop Up, whereas Exeggutor doesn't really have the has that luxury. So I suppose to look at it in another kind of long-term, short-term, Seismitoad can play the long game. One of the problems of Exeggutor is sometimes you'll lose in the first few turns, and you need to be able to recognise that. Seismitoad doesn't. Again, I encourage you to look at the final between Alex Dow and Matthew King from Nottingham Regionals. Hopefully the last shameless plug today. I can't promise. And if you look at that game, you'll see that, I'm not going to ruin too much. I want you to go and watch the game. But Alex demonstrates how his deck, even if it has a slow start, can really start making some impressive comebacks. If you can trainer lock your opponent and then have lasers, super scoop up, and hammers, while they're trainer locked, you can make, a comeback from 5 prizes down. Exeggutor can't. If your opponent gets set up, then it's not hard to KO a 100 HP stage 1, and, if they get an attacker set up, you're probably going to lose. And while we're on it, that really is the biggest downside of Exeggutor. If Exeggutor sets up nicely and early, it's going to win pretty much any game, but it can't do comebacks. And this is why I said it has a bad Donphan matchup. Now, when I say Donphan, I mean Speed Donphan. The kind of Donphan deck I was playing at Yeovil Regionals, where you are going to get a Donphan on turn 2 almost every game, because by turn 2, you've run through half of your deck. Between roller skates and acro bike and bicycle and, playing a Juniper every turn, because that's the only support you're playing along with random receiver, and then you've got the roller skates, acro bike and bicycle that you can use to draw into it. You really can get going. And let's say Exeggutor does 30 damage per turn. Let's say there's a Verbank out because I can't counter their stadium. With a laser, they're doing 60. So they do 60 to my Donphan. Even if they hammer the energy, I only need 1 energy to do spinning turn for 40. And as long as I've got a muscle band or a strong energy, it's going to do 60. And as long as I can do 60 one of the 2 turns, I'm easily 2-hit KOing Exeggutor. I need a muscle band or a strong energy every other turn to be taking them down in 2 hits. And because it's so flimsy, it generally doesn't play super scoop up or healing or any of that. So if I'm playing Donphan, they can hit me, and bearing in mind, I'm going to be trying to use stuff like Hawlucha with a focus band to stop them KOing me in 1 hit. Because they're only doing 60 to Hawlucha anyway, so Hawlucha will survive a turn and has free retreat. And I'm going to be putting down robo substitutes. And then even if they hit a Donphan, either because they use a Lysandra or they use Genesect's red signal, let's say they bring up the Donphan, they hit it for 30, play a laser, I'm on 60. Now there's a 25% chance that Donphan stays asleep and I lose a turn, and they essentially get a 1-hit KO. Because by the time it goes back to them, Donphan's got 90 damage on, they hit it for 30, and it dies of poison going into my turn. They've essentially got a 1-hit KO on it. Outside of that, if they don't hit the heads on laser and I hit a tails, they are not 2-hitting KOing Donphan, and I am 2-hit KOing them. Now they can obviously still get rid of Donphan's energy, but it's harder to do when the attacker only needs 1 energy, and with basic energy they're going to have to hit quite a few crushing hammers in order to stop that. And that's the big downside of Exeggutor. If your opponent can set up an attacker, you're going to lose. Anything like Donphan, a Genesect with free energy if you can't get rid of the energy, will run right through you. An Yveltal with a few energy piled on will just run through all the Exeggutors very quickly. And that is the big downside of Exeggutor. It's got 100 HP and it works on essentially stopping your opponent playing. But if they get one decent attacker set up and you can't get lucky with laser flips, you are going to lose that game. And this is why you need to be willing to scoop very early. Seismitoad doesn't do that. Seismitoad, you can lose a couple of toads and then get set up and get the lock on and you're going to win. With Exeggutor, if you've got them supporter locked, but they've got a couple of attackers already set up, that supporter lock is going to be irrelevant because every turn they need to do 100 damage. If they can do 100 damage every turn, it doesn't matter what else they're not able to do. They're going to win. The other thing which must be mentioned is flimsy in the early game, and Execute has 30 HP. You don't get donked with lasers anywhere near as much as you would think you do. Obviously, if your opponent goes first and plays Laser Verbank, they can KO you on turn 1 without attacking. But that doesn't happen. It'll happen very occasionally. So, that's what it really comes down to. And the other, I suppose, important thing, Exeggutor is a cheaper deck. Although I suppose you really need a Genesect and a Virizion. Still cheaper than 4 Seismitoads. So, they're different kinds of decks. Exeggutor gives a more complete lock and doesn't really have any bad matchups. I mentioned Speed Donphan as a bad matchup. That's if you can set up a couple of Donphan and Robo subs. Execute will beat anything if it sets up nice and quickly, whereas Seismitoad will lose to something like Virizion and Genesect unless you it'll lose to Virizion and Genesect unless you have a crazy good start. There is a reason Seismitoad's doing better though. I think on balance it is just about the better deck because it's more durable, it can make comebacks, it doesn't have the problem with being flimsy. If you're playing and you can guarantee a perfect start, Exeggutor's the better deck. Because it's more powerful if you get going early. But it's not got the kind of screw you over from turn 1 ability of Seismitoad, nor does it have the I can make a comeback from 5 prizes down that Seismitoad can do. Now, if you're thinking what's going to happen when they play each other, don't worry, I've got you covered. It's a very boring answer, I'm afraid. It comes down to start. If Seismitoad gets a better start, they're going to train a lock Exeggutor, they're going to take a few prizes, and they're going to win very easily. If Exeggutor gets a good start and is able to support a lock Seismitoad, stop them drawing into energy, or get rid of energy when they get it down, get some head ringers down on Seismitoad so a DCE isn't going to be enough for Quaking Punch, they will win very easily. The weakness isn't really a huge deal. It's not a huge deal. Now, Exeggutor does have the type advantage on Seismitoad. So if you put a muscle band on Exeggutor rather than hitting for 30, it's going to hit for 60. But neither of these decks are going for the kind of big, massive KOs. They are going for, haha, you can't play, now I win. Similarly, Exeggutor's got a resistance to Seismitoad, which is useful, but it's only got 100 HP. It doesn't really matter if Seismitoad is only doing 10 damage a turn with Quaking Punch. If they are trainer locking you, so you can't get rid of their energy or play lasers, and they're playing their own laser, they're going to be 2-hit KOing you very easily with laser. You'll do 10 damage plus 30 for laser, leaving them on 40 damage. They'll be on 70 damage coming into your turn, 80 damage, and then they'll die from poison, going into your opponent's turn. So it really is the weakness and resistance. People who haven't really looked into the matchup are going to look at it and go, well, Exeggutor hits for weakness and resists Seismitoad, so of course it's better. The honest answer is it's down to start. If Seismitoad gets a trainer lock nice and early, it's going to win. If Exeggutor gets a supporter lock nice and early, it's going to win. Unless Seismitoad, gets some kind of really crazy good start. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Exeggutor versus Seismitoad. I hope I've explained, how both decks work and the differences between them quite nicely. They are surprisingly similar decks. They want to stop you playing and they want to abuse lasers and crushing hammers to really make sure that you can't play the game and you sit there dying of poison more than anything else. Quaking Punch maxes out at 50, Blockade maxes out at 30. They're killing you more with poison than they are with anything else. And that, ladies and gentlemen, will about do it for this week. I've taken you through a couple interesting little bits of news. I have taken you through the stakes results and told you everything you need to know. And I have educated you, hopefully, a little bit about Seismitoad and Exeggutor and which deck you should play. Hopefully, that's what you needed to know. But if it isn't, you know the deal. All you need to do is email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk or tweet me at the Wassy, and I'll be more than happy to get back to you with anything you need me to do. Make sure that you check out the videos on my YouTube channel. Not a shameless plug, so I'm not apologising. That one was very planned and deliberate, and there was a little bit of shame involved. And make sure that you tell your friends about this and all of that. I only keep going with this kind of thing because people listen and, get in touch, and I can see the numbers of people listening. If nobody listened, I shouldn't waste my time doing it. As always, thank you very much for listening. Look after yourselves till next week. My name's Ross, and you've been listening to PTCG Radio.